Thank you all for being here. I'm loving what you're sharing in the chat. I'm going to do my best today to keep my eye on the chat and then also focus really in on what we're doing together here. So you're all here for a reason. I think hopefully the topic of team retreats is timely and important for you now. I think as we're ending the calendar year, approaching the new year, a lot of leaders are thinking about how they can engage their teams on an offsite, on a retreat, whatever you might want to call it. So today, what I'm really hoping to do is to give you a process and some considerations for how you can make these experiences really powerful and meaningful and ultimately purposeful for your team and to get exactly what you want from the experience. I think sometimes we can relate to the experience of being brought together as a team and being unclear or maybe about why we're there or what we're doing. And oftentimes the result of that is that you don't get the intended result that you want from the retreat. In fact, you get the opposite of that. So my hope today is that we're going to be able to dispel some of those habits and that potential for your next retreat, and that you can really make sure that it's a purposeful retreat that inspires meaningful, positive change for your people. As I just mentioned, I'm kind of flying this plane solo today, so I'm letting people in as they come in. I will not be monitoring the chat for questions. Please, if you have questions for one another, please ask them in the chat. I will not be answering them in the chat. I will have a Q&A at the very end of this presentation today. I know some of you have said that you can't stay for the full time, and that's okay. If you do have questions for me, please feel free to connect with me either over email or LinkedIn or another way that you know how to get in touch with me. I'd be happy to answer your questions that you have there if you're not able to ask them today. And there's going to be some times today when I ask you to interact in the chat with me. Other than that, like I said, I'm not going to be monitoring the chat, so don't expect me to answer your questions if you put them there. Lastly is I have a drawing. I have some prizes that I'm going to give away today, and we're going to be doing that just before the Q&A at the end of the session. Yes, you do have to be present here to win one of the prizes. I have 2 gift certificates, $25 gift certificates to Better World Books. And then I'm also giving away a 1-hour coaching or consulting session with me. So those 3 prizes, I have everyone's name who registered in a bowl here. We're going to do it old school and pick slips of paper from the bowl. So please stick around if you can for that. And with that, I want to kind of jump into our topic today, Purposeful Team Retreats. And I'll just give you an overview of what the plan is. So I want to talk about why purposeful retreats are important. And this word purposeful is intentional. We're going to dig into what that means and how you can ensure that your retreat that you plan, design, and lead is purposeful and fulfills what it is that you're hoping to get out of the experience. You'll notice here when I indicate leading purposeful retreats, I talk about and beyond the retreat. I think often leaders think about retreats as one-offs, and then we go back into the normal flow of work, and there's no meaningful change beyond the retreat. And so I want us to be thinking about this before the retreat. How can we support meaningful change beyond the end of the experience? As I said, I'll have a prize drawing and then some time for questions for those of you who are here at the end. So please hold your questions until the end, or you can ask one another in the chat. I just won't keep an eye on that. So first, I want everyone to just think of a time that you were involved in a team retreat that you would consider to be subpar. Subpar can mean bad, it can mean boring, it can mean confusing. Whatever you consider to be a subpar team retreat. You don't have to name any names or organizations or anything here. Just think about that time. Think about the experience, where you were, what you did, who you were with. And share with me in the chat, what were some of the factors that you think led to the experience being subpar? Whatever it was that led to that experience, share it in the chat, even if it's just a word or a phrase. What are some of the reasons? Unclear purpose, great. Start with vision, lack of planning and engagement, same topics as always, sure. No goals or points, lack of focus, yep. Stuck on one topic. Not taking entire group wishes or opinion, great. So maybe not having the pulse of the group, didn't feel seen. Never revisited, yes. Too many presentations, less interaction, great. Childish activities, yeah. I think we're all familiar with some of those team sort of Googled team building activities that we wonder why we're doing this. Very superficial, yeah. Leader of the retreat wasn't credible to the team, great. That's really important too. Okay, great. Big leader, not even there. Yes, thank you for saying that. Maybe they're there and they're not participating, right? We'll talk a little bit about what that creates. Team wasn't invested, sure. Excellent, wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of those reasons. The only one that I had that wasn't up there was that the food was really bad. I don't know if anyone's experienced that, but food's always a factor too. But yes, all of these are clear reasons why no coffee. Yeah, clear reasons why a retreat may fail in creating the kind of change and engagement that you want to see. So today we're talking about purposeful retreats. And anytime we talk about purpose, we have to ask the question why. Purpose surrounds the question why. And for a purposeful retreat, my claim is that you have to start with a clear and resonant why. Clear meaning people have to understand why they're there. You have to maybe reiterate why they're there, right? People have to know what the purpose of the retreat is. And resonant meaning it has to be shared amongst the team and it needs to invoke some sort of an emotional reaction. So there needs to be an experience people have where they say, yes, I'm here. I'm excited to be here. I know why we're here and it's important that I'm here and that we engage. I think a lot of times in what people shared in the chat is that the purpose is unclear and people are not sure why they're taking time out of their busy day to be there and to interact with one another. So we're really coming back to this why, the clear and resonant why. And as we talk today, I'm going to reference us back to this concept as we talk about planning, designing, and leading. It's always going to come back to this clear and resonant why for the team. And I want to kind of do a little compare and contrast situation here. I'm going to show you maybe what a typical approach is that I've seen from a lot of leaders for planning, designing, and leading a retreat. And then I'm going to show you maybe contrast the process with what I would consider to be a purposeful retreat. So I am enlisting the help of ChatGPT here for this portion. So I gave a prompt to ChatGPT to outline a full day work team offsite retreat that focuses on team building, collaboration, and fun for a marketing team of 12. And I do have to say, when I gave this to ChatGPT, it was more impressive than what I expected. It actually gave a quite robust outline and rationale for a lot of these activities. But this is the timeline that it spit out, the schedule that it gave me. You can see there's some different types of activities, some team building activities, collaborative challenge, collaborative goal setting, fun activity, right? With some breaks in between. And I would consider this to be a pretty traditional, pretty typical type of work retreat. And what I would anticipate from this retreat is that you would come away with some amount of collaboration and team experience through these activities. It sounds like fun. There's some Olympics theme things here. And then I'm not really sure what else you would get from this. And I think what we can look back to is the process and the prompt that I gave. I think that this is a really similar way that leaders are thinking about their retreats, is thinking pretty vaguely. I want to focus on team building. I want to enhance collaboration, and I want people to have a good time. And if that's the amount of clarity that you have and the thought that you've put into the retreat at the beginning, I think you're going to end up with exactly those results, which is some amount of those things, and then a lot of unknowns. And that lack of clarity and lack of purpose, I think, is what leads us, and with some of the experiences that you shared, maybe to have some subpar experiences on team retreats. And really, I'm going to contrast this with what I consider to be a purposeful approach, which is where we are centering and focusing on that clear and resonant why from the beginning as we plan and as we think about what we can do for this retreat and how it will look, as we design the activities and the experience of the retreat, what the day will feel like, what people will experience when we are together. and then how we will lead and how we will support the change moving forward. If the clear and resonant why is at the center of all these steps, that's what can lead to really meaningful, positive change for the team and for the organization moving forward. It's really investing that at the beginning, up front, as we're doing these 3 steps, where we can ensure that the retreat has the intended result, which is creating meaningful, positive change for our people and for our teams. So the first step here is planning purposeful retreats. And in order to have a purposeful retreat, we really need to identify what the team needs. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. Some people, I think, default to giving a survey to their team. I'm not going to tell you not to survey your team. It can be a really effective way to understand what the team's needs are. I will caution you, though, to not necessarily default to a survey. One, because often surveys are very problem-focused if we create the survey that way. And it can really elevate the problems on the team over some of the strengths. And we'll talk a little bit more about that balance and what the ideal balance is. That's one of them. And then the other reason is, of course, people are surveyed out these days. We have so many surveys in our inboxes, and we're asked every time we buy something to get a survey. I think it can be hard to get participation in a survey. So I wouldn't say you need to default to a survey. You can have appreciative conversations with your team. You can take the pulse in your one-on-ones, in small groups. You can ask these questions and start to get a sense for what the team needs are. And ideally, if you're connected with your team pretty well, you should know what some of these team needs are. So, of course, for any why for a purposeful retreat, you're going to need to understand the team needs. The other thing I want to highlight here is that often team leaders, they assume that their team needs to work on teamwork. And teamwork here can be a pretty vague concept. There's a lot of elements of teamwork that we might need to tease out when we're talking about how a team works together appropriately and it functions well. And I want to introduce a concept here to everyone that's called task interdependence. And this is a concept in organization development where we look at different tasks and we see the kind of interdependence that is required to complete the task. I'm going to give you a few examples here from the sports world. So if you think about a gymnastics team at the Olympics, where each individual is performing to their best of their ability, and then the highest scores get accumulated together for the team, that kind of interdependence is very different than, for example, a hockey team, which has people out on the ice at the same time, passing, responding to one another, working together in that moment, and sort of interacting with one another constantly in the task at hand. Sometimes leaders have teams who have less interdependent tasks. There's 3 different kinds of interdependence. So sometimes they assume that we need to work on collaboration, we need to work on our coordination, when the level of coordination doesn't really match the level of interdependence. So it's important for a leader to understand what is the level of interdependence of the task and what is the kind of collaboration and coordination that we need in order to make that shared why, the clear and resonant why, really shared amongst the team. And I think sometimes I see with leaders that there's a misunderstanding of the task, and then they're trying to force some sort of coordination that really doesn't align with the task. So these are the kinds of concepts I think that are important to understand as you're identifying your team needs going into the planning process. I always support leaders in bringing in resources and frameworks that support that why. So if I'm leading a team and we decide that there are elements of teamwork that we need to focus on in our collaboration or our shared vision, I would encourage leaders to bring in a resource like a book or a framework or something that can help support the investigation and that experience in your retreat. So 2 that I really like, that I use a lot, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is by Patrick Lencioni, is a good teamwork framework to use. And then another one that you can't see here, it's blurred, but Teams That Work is another book by Tenenbaum and Salas. That is another framework that can sort of help you to dig into some of these issues of teamwork to provide a bit more nuance and focus more specifically on some of the elements of teamwork. If your retreat why is because you want people to feel rejuvenated and appreciated, you can bring in other resources that support in that area. But I think bringing in an outside resource and a framework can kind of help you to investigate and to elicit more of that experience that you want to see. Lastly, of course, you have to weigh other important factors. Anytime we're talking about a retreat, we need to consider things like the location of the retreat, the time of the year that you're holding this retreat, what is the length of time that you want to be together, that you can be together, what's the resource requirement, and then, of course, anytime you're bringing people away from work, what is the time cost? And again, I'll bring us back to this idea of our clear and resonant why. With all of these factors, you really want to compare some of these elements with the clear and resonant why and see that they're really supporting it is what it is that you want to do at the retreat together. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes to look at these questions, and I want you to reflect on the questions. So take out a piece of paper or something that you want to write with, and I want you to think about the position that you're in and how you might be interacting with a team retreat. So maybe you're a team leader thinking about planning a retreat, or you're a participant on a team and might have some influence in helping to plan and design a retreat, or you're a facilitator and thinking about a team that you might be working with. So I want you to imagine whatever the scenario is that you have, and I want you to answer these questions. Maybe just jot down a few notes to yourself. First, what is our clear and resonant why? And there's some sub-questions here to ask yourself. Does it get people excited? Is it really shared amongst the entire team? And how do you know? To kind of challenge where there might be some assumptions. And then the second question here, how can we balance elevating strengths and addressing areas for improvement? I think in a lot of teams, we can get a little bit problem obsessed when we think about a way for us to use our time away from the office. I think we can become a little bit obsessed with the problem and then maybe not focus on elevating some of the strengths that are present on the team. Some teams might be problem avoidant. Maybe you're focused mostly on strengths and not addressing real problems. Or maybe it's unclear. So I want everyone to take about a minute here to reflect on these questions, and then I'll ask you to share some of your insights in the chat. Okay, I'd love to hear what you all are thinking. So if you'd be willing to either share your clear and resonant why, or some insights from the second question about balancing strengths and areas for improvement, please put those in the chat, even if it's just a word or some ideas, a phrase. What are you reflecting on? Resource recommendation. Thank you, Sarah. Culture code. Does anyone have a clear and resonant why for their team that they want to share? Help reset after leadership transition. Great. Reestablish trust. Valerie, our team retreats reflect the year and celebrate successes and also think about goals for the future. Great. Sometimes celebration is undervalued. Get everyone moving in the same direction toward a common goal. Great. Form the group into community of practice. Excellent. Okay, I see some more ideas coming in here. I see some themes of trust. Great, long-term vision and mission. Excellent. Okay, great. These are really important questions, again, when we're thinking about when we're in the planning stage, to be reflecting on these ideas here and being really clear about some of these before we move on to the design phase. So next, after we've put our plan together, we want to think about designing. And when we're thinking about designing, first, I really want us to consider adopting a design thinking approach to this, right? So how can we take some ideas from design thinking to iterate on a design and be really intentional about making sure that our design really fulfills our purpose and again pulls us back to our clear and resonant why. Some categories of retreat activities I just want to name. This isn't extensive by any means, but if we think about what we're actually doing at the retreat, there might be some strategic activities where we look at vision and direction and places that we're emphasizing, right? Moving forward, strategic planning. We may dive into a work challenge in a real-time space with everyone there. We may look at skill building and training. And we've talked a little bit about teamwork enhancement. You might be looking for an experience that is uplifting, that's celebrative of and appreciative of the team. And then maybe even a restorative experience, some activities that may get at some restorative practices for your people. These are all important, and these are valid reasons for a retreat. One thing I really want to caution you all about is to not try to do too many of these things at once. I think often what I see on retreats is we're trying to address all of these different areas, and that can confuse the purpose of the retreat. There are activities, I think, that can address a number of these at once. That can be, for example, uplifting, restorative, and address teamwork and skill building. Some approaches that I use a lot, like appreciative inquiry, I think can be a lot of these at once. But you don't want to try to focus on too many of these things at once, because again, I think that can really muddy the purpose of the retreat and have people leave and be unsure of what it is that you're exactly doing there and what you're trying to cultivate. Another important thing as you're designing the retreat is balancing your activities when you create this schedule to understand what the experience of your people are at this retreat. I always encourage leaders who are looking at retreats to put themselves in the seat of the person at the retreat and see how it would feel to go through this day. And a lot of the research shows us that experiencing positive emotions helps to support continued change in a team and in an individual. So if you can create a positive emotional experience and sustain that experience throughout the retreat, chances are you have a better chance of creating and cultivating the change that you want to see. So always consider what the lived experience of the people who are at your retreat, what they're experiencing, and ultimately, if you can, include them in that process to make sure that you're designing what it is that you want to see and what they want to experience. Lastly, another word of caution is often what I see from leaders is they want to maximize the time that they have, and they have a tendency to overschedule the retreat. And one of the downsides of overscheduling is that it leaves no room for spontaneous conversations or spontaneous activities or connections, maybe between coworkers or across teams. I think that tendency to overschedule really is at the cost of some of the emergence that can happen at a retreat when you're away from the office, when you're away from your day-to-day. So I would always encourage you to think about how you can schedule in intentional space. If you're someone that likes to have a really strict schedule, make sure that you're scheduling in space for some of these impromptu benefits of a retreat that hopefully you can have and that will help create and sustain the change that you want to see. So I have more reflection questions here for you. So let's take a few minutes to think about these and jot some notes to folks to yourself. First, what is the right balance for our team? And what I mean by this is the activities. And how are we designing to support that clear and resonant why? So what's the right balance for our team? And then how can our design support open, honest, and enthusiastic participation? And the sub-question here I think is really important is, are we assuming that people are feeling psychologically safe? And are we assuming that they're willing to be vulnerable? Or are you designing your retreat to support those things? Psychological safety and vulnerability are really important key concepts in a space, in a retreat space. And how can you design to support these elements? Take a few minutes to jot down some notes to yourself, and then I'll ask you to share again. Okay, please, when you're done jotting down your last note there, please share some in the chat. What are some of your reflections and insights from these questions? Do you have thoughts about how you can design to support your why? Design to support psychological safety and vulnerability? I'd love to hear what y'all are thinking. Molly, great. Yeah, it's good to know what your team would want, right? So good balance of purposeful discussion about goals mixed with casual conversation, multiple ways to engage. Great. Differences in what it takes for people to feel emotionally and psychologically safe. Yes. Yeah, Terilyn, I see that where there's a lot of different desires for the time together. Okay, great. Yeah, good to have obviously to have a pulse on your team and understand again what it is that they're needing, what it is that they want, and then again we're connecting it back to that clear and resonant why that all of these concepts are pointing back to. Ladder of emotional safety. I love it. Yeah, creating a space for everyone to share. Great. That leads us really nicely into the last part here when we talk about leading purposeful retreats. This first concept is really important, and that is the interaction and engagement of the leader. So how are people in powerful positions engaging with, setting the example? How are they either supporting or detracting from psychological safety and vulnerability? And as someone who consults with leaders, I always tell the person who I'm working with, the leader in the room, that they have to set that example for what they want to see, understanding the dynamics of power in an organization and on a team. The leader has to be willing to set the tone and to create a space of psychological safety and vulnerability. And I think there are teams where that exists, where that psychological safety and vulnerability really is respected and cultivated. And then there are teams where that doesn't exist, and that is not something you can just flip a switch on, right? So I think that leaders have to be really aware of the state of psychological safety of their people and know that they need to be the ones to lead in that regard, to create psychological safety and help people to really feel like they can participate and be open and vulnerable. Because those qualities are really important in creating some of these purposeful retreat experiences. But there's no shortcut to psychological safety and vulnerability. So it's important to understand how a leader's participation can affect others' psychological safety and vulnerability. Another note here is, again, because people are more collaborative, more creative, more likely to create different kinds of connections in their brain and with one another when they're experiencing positive emotions. I always urge leaders to think about ways that they can prioritize positive emotional experiences on these retreats. Often, again, because leaders want to maximize the time they have together, they might say, hey, we really want to dig into a problem in our time together. And often what will happen is that the emotional tone of digging into a problem and sort of uncovering maybe some challenges can lead to an overall emotional experience that is quite negative for people there. People get closed off when they're experiencing negative emotions, and they're less likely to imagine the kind of change that you want to see on your team. So it's important to just anticipate and have tabs on the emotional experience of the people in the room, and to, again, try to prioritize an uplifting, positive emotional experience for your retreat. What comes next? Again, as you're thinking about leading this retreat, and this is in the planning and design process as well, how are you going to support the positive change moving forward? And can you view this not just as a one-off experience with your team, but instead as the start of a positive change journey for your team? So if it's the start of the journey, then what comes next? If this is just the beginning, what's the next step after this retreat? How are you going to take what you've experienced there and really incorporate it into the way that your team functions? How are you going to follow up with what comes out of the retreat? What's the next experience that you're going to have? And can you put that intention in at the beginning, and then as you're leading this retreat, to, again, move this forward and to make sure that the changes that maybe are sparked during this retreat are supported to take root into your team and into your organization. Lastly, just a consideration for who will be facilitating these experiences. Often, there are folks on your team maybe that have facilitation credentials or experience, and you might want to utilize those maybe to preserve resources. And I think that's an important consideration. It's also a consideration to think about would it be beneficial to bring someone in from the outside so that we have more of an objective perspective, maybe someone that can provide some insights into the way that we interact and into our systems from an outside external perspective. And if you bring in someone from the outside, then that allows you to participate, or those individuals who might be facilitating from the inside, to just participate as a team member. It can be difficult to wear multiple hats, for example, as a facilitator and as someone who's experiencing the retreat. So a lot of times it can be beneficial to bring in folks from the outside. Many of you work on campuses. A lot of campuses have talent development offices or HR offices, or there might be credentialed coaches or facilitators that are on campus that are available for you to use. Or there's external facilitators like me and a lot of other folks maybe on this call who can come and help and provide some of that outside facilitation that allows your team to really focus on that clear and resonant why, and that supports you in creating an experience that will support that. Okay, 2 more reflection questions here for this step. First, how will leader participation support our clear and resonant why? And again, there's some sub-questions. Who will facilitate? How will people in power positions lead and engage? And what might we need outside support to create and lead? And then the second question is about continued positive change. So how can we foster that continued positive change? And how can we position the retreat as the start of a positive change journey? I'll give you 2 minutes here, and then I'll ask you to share. I'm loving what I'm seeing in the chat. I'm just going through and catching up on what I missed. Yeah, great. Cheryl, yes, absolutely. I do want to clarify something that Cheryl said outside support may help teams feel free to speak openly, but leadership should always be there, in my opinion. Yes, I agree. Um, Leadership presence and involvement is probably the most powerful signal that they're serious about the change that they're talking about and they're wanting to create. And without them present and involved, that can be one of the most chilling factors in preventing the change that you want to see. Great. Share any other insights that you have from these questions. These are great. Yeah, building on retreat activities after the retreat made it feel like it had purpose, right? That you're actually bringing it forth. Yeah, leadership presence, yeah, sends a message to the team that you matter. Exactly. Presence speaks volumes. Okay, there's some good reflections here maybe, and maybe you're having the experience of some elements of maybe your last retreat that you could incorporate next time to make sure that it's meaningful and that it's purposeful. Okay, fantastic. I'm loving all of the ideas and interaction in the chat. Please keep those coming if you have other insights that you want to share. Um, so I want to just offer that retreats can be they can be a challenging process to plan, to design, to facilitate when you as a leader are balancing all of the responsibilities of leadership that of course comes. I run an independent consulting and leadership coaching practice. My purpose of my practice is to support team leaders in supporting themselves in fulfilling their potential. And a lot of times it can help just to have an external someone external that can help you to plan, design, facilitate, ask some of these questions to make sure we're coming back to that clear and resonant why to support your retreat experience. So if you want support in this, please, I'd encourage you to schedule a discovery call with me. There's no obligation whatsoever to work with me in a discovery call. It's free. It's a chance for you to understand how I work with leaders and teams. We can interview one another and see if it's a good fit. Down below, you can see some of the organizations where I've worked with leaders, either on retreats or in coaching experiences, and some organizations that I'm currently working with. I love doing what I do. It's one of the true joys in my life, and I think to try to help team leaders to create these purposeful team experiences is really one of the goals of my business. So just so you know, I want to give you an idea of the kinds of the pricing that I have. I offer design consulting. So let's say, for example, if you're just planning a team retreat and you want someone to help you to design it, to think again about how you can make it more purposeful, I offer consulting calls, and that can range anywhere from as little as $150 to as much as $1,000 or more, depending on the level of engagement. Everything is customized to you and to what you need and what your resources are available to you. And then, of course, I offer retreat design and facilitation. So I'll actually come in and facilitate for you. And that goes anywhere from $2,500 for a half-day retreat, and that includes all the planning, designing, and facilitation and follow-up, to as much as $10,000 to $12,000, depending on how long it is. So I always like to give a point of reference as people are in some of it talking about and thinking about working with me. But everything is customized for you and dependent on what it is that you need and what you have available to you. So I'd love to encourage you all to sign up for a discovery call with me. It's a really simple process. You can scan this QR code, and then I'll drop a link in the chat after this that you can use to schedule a call. It's a 50-minute call. Again, like I mentioned, there's no obligation whatsoever to work with me. And ultimately, in these discovery calls too, I want to give you value. So if nothing else, you'll at least come away with some clarity from that call that can help you to design and plan, design, and facilitate your next retreat. So the other thing I want to just offer is anyone who schedules a discovery call with me today, I'd be willing to offer a 15% discount on any service that you end up purchasing from me. So if you schedule a discovery call today, I can see who scheduled today. If we end up working together, I'll give you 15% off of what the typical price would be. So I'd love for you to schedule a call with me today, even if you're not sure what it is that you want to do. We can work through some of those questions, and then we'll be able to hopefully give you some more clarity as you move forward.